you very much for your time, sir. Appreciate it very much. Prashant this side. How would you sort of rate the performance on investments over the last 3 years, sir?
Well, rating the performance is a little more difficult. That would have to take into consideration what the expectations were or what the requirements were to sustain growth. I would just like to, state the facts that there was a very sharp decline in investments beginning 2011, and that decline kind of continued till 2014. And from 2014-15, there has been at least a little pickup. Not adequate, but there has been a little pickup compared to what that declining trend was. So I think this is not a performance which one can say is satisfactory. One can never be satisfied with our results. We always yearn for more, but it certainly has put an end to the declining trend of new investments coming into play. So I think we need to do a lot more, but at least the declining trend has stopped. That's the way I'll put it.
So Mr. Vyas, if we had to say discuss exactly the same thing a year from now in terms of where we would be in terms of private capex, do you think that it would just be higher capacity utilization, or we're going to start seeing incremental money put into new projects?
Well, I don't see a significant shift from the position that we are in right now. We have been where we are for a fairly long time. 3 years is a long time to remain stuck, and we have seen actually a fall in capacity utilization. There hasn't been an improvement on that front, so demand actually isn't picking up. So I do not expect a sharp turnaround in investments. I do not see a very substantial recovery of the lost ground on capacity utilization. I think recovery is a little distance away. We will have to wait to see what the monsoon turns out to be, but that's the only hope. There isn't any reason why private sector should get into investments in a big way. The government has not shown any inclination to pump prime the economy. So there ain't any big change to say that a year from now we will be in a significantly different position.
Mr. Vyas, the last set of data which I put out, which is projects yet to see implementation, that has remained pretty steady, right? About 44, 45, 46% in that range all the way from financial year 12. This is the important number. If this number starts to come down, then companies will see work, orders, etc. actually starting to fructify. What do you think has been the reason for this not happening?
I think what we're looking is at a ratio of the stock of projects, and that's a pretty steady number. It's unlikely that number is going to undergo a big change because the stock of all projects, the entire order book is very large, and if you take a ratio over there, it will remain around 45% or so. I don't see that number changing. What's important is to see whether there is a big change in new investment proposals being made. So if there is aggression over there, then I think that's a sign of a turnaround. People start making proposals for new projects pretty early if they see an opportunity. For example, if you see right now, there are quite a few number of companies saying that they're going to get into electric vehicles. So even in these times, we were talking about very futuristic things because they see a market over there. So if you see a lot of people saying that they're going to set up new projects, that's when the capex cycle actually is beginning to show up.
Mr. Vyas, I completely take your point, but the fact is that that number, new project announcements, has bounced off the lows in a very large way, right? It's off the peak levels, of course. But the fact remains, the number, again, to come back to that 45% number, which are yet to see implementation, that is as a percentage of total order book, right? So if that starts to pick up, wouldn't that be the real deal? I mean, you know, one can make announcements, but it has to translate into actual work.
Yes, you are right. If the number of projects that are yet to get into the implementation mode rises, then it does show a turnaround. I'm not denying the ratio. That ratio is important in showing a turnaround. Yes, I agree with you. The only problem is that number is unlikely to show a major change because that number is based on a very large stock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Vyas, I just wanted to ask you about what's happening in the steel and the metal space when it comes to capex. On the fringe, it seems as though there is much more confidence. Can you just give us a detail in terms of where capacity utilization stands and whether we could see maybe a revival sector specific which would be linked to steel and metals, where it could come to completing old projects or even commissioning new?
Well, the biggest news on steel is that POSCO has exited. So that was one of the biggest steel projects that we had in India, the biggest FDI in India. And finally, they said we are exiting and not doing this project. So that, in a sense, creates a vacuum. So for a long time, there was a belief that POSCO would set up this humongous, huge steel plant in Odisha. And now that's not going to happen. So obviously, there are others who are trying to see if they can fill that gap in. I think prices will play a major role in determining where investments will go in over there. There certainly is some interest in steel and metals for now. It is quite likely that there can be some increase in investment in this sector, but I wouldn't, lay a bet on that too early. I think the big deal is that there are two things. There has been some movement in the prices, and there has been a vacuum created by POSCO's exit.
Okay. All right.